Welcome to GRC442. I'm Dan Gerard. Next to me is Kevin DeJong. We're going to discuss how to shift left embedding controls in your infrastructure pipelines. So with that, let's begin. Quick agenda. We're going to go into the intro of what we're talking about. We're going to talk about compliance changes, what you will take away from this, a hands-on demo that Kevin will provide. We're going to discuss AWS CDK aspects patterns, how to shift left into your development flow, multi-layer validation, how you can kind of combine these things to make your own pipeline possible, and then also how to define some custom patterns in your libraries. Okay, so we're going to discuss why CDK, just to kind of level set across the audience. And maybe like, I know what CDK is, Dan, why are we here? But just to make sure everybody's aware. So it's a cloud development kit, AWS cloud development kit. It's open source, infrastructure as code framework, and there's the languages that it supports. Note that I put the asterisk next to TypeScript. That's typically where new features for CDK come out, just to be advised of that. Okay, so a simple example here that you can achieve with CDK, building a bucket that's managed, versioned with encryption, 5 or 6 lines of code, pretty powerful stuff. So you build your code in CDK, you're able to synthesize CloudFormation, and then that gets you net AWS resources built to the template that you provided. So this allows you to type safely, autocomplete in your IDE, which is a huge benefit for those sleepy nights that you might be getting some work in. Reusable infrastructure components that you can rinse, repeat, and define your control objectives. Build in best practices and security controls, all the while trying to provide a faster development envelope for your customers. So, we talked about this in the agenda, CDK constructs and aspects, building blocks and cross-cutting concerns. You're gonna hear that verb a lot, cross-cut. It might be a new one for you, and we'll get into that later. So just to kind of bubble up constructs, you might hear Kevin talk about level or layer 2 or level 2.5 constructs. There's some customization in there. So start off with level 1. That's where you have a direct one-to-one mapping to your CloudFormation resources. You have L2 AWS constructs that are curated patterns with sensible defaults. Kevin will showcase how you take these sensible defaults and add in your own kind of methods and means. And then L3, where you're really customizing that resource to your corporation or your enterprise's standard. CDK aspects also add that cross-cutting capability. And so, in a way, this is the same constructs that I talked about earlier are defined here in that code sample, where you have a very simple bucket, S3 bucket. And then you have a bucket in your layer or level 2 construct where you have encryption enables. Layer 3 provides you that pattern combining, I'm using CloudFront, you're really customizing that resource to your that simple S3 resource with CloudFront to get that static web-defined hosting. Okay, so aspects. This is a unique way to cut across your environment. And note I put in feature enablement. These are controls as well. Think of controls as features in your environment. And so what Kevin will showcase is how you can take aspects and add these features or controls to your infrastructure as you need, without actually modifying the code itself. So here's the sample. We're building in the capability to add tags, another feature, to your environment without having to modify the original code itself using aspects. Okay, so this is a little bit of a story of my past where I was an infrastructure as code developer doing DevOps. And I had to do this, right? I want to build cool things. And then this happens. And before long, you have a line outside your office that's literally happened to me where people were begging, hey, I need to get this shipped out. I submitted my PR. I need to move fast. I'm waiting for this customer. And then you're just saying, okay, this is getting to thundering herd kind of levels. I need to get away from this because this is driving my work-life balance into oblivion. You need to be able to help these builders automate the things that they're trying to satisfy your customers but in a secure, manageable way where you can pipeline these things. And then, admittedly, one person was like, I linted everything. My linter says everything is cool. Like, just hit the, approve on the PR, which I laughed at. So, traditional methods that you might be using today. Pull requests, we talked about those. Pair programming sessions, really good for cross-training in my experience. Code walkthroughs, need some coffee, need some tea, because that can get long-winded. Compliance checklists, as you're going through this, making sure that as you read through the lines of code, it's not really optimal and gets tiresome very quickly. And then there's always the pre and post deployment audits that you're performing to make sure, hey, is this actually achieving my control standards for my company? Again, this is manual, laborious, and it's way too slow, especially when you start getting everybody to identify to a couple types of automation languages. That line starts to grow. Okay, so you need to automate these compliance checks in your environment. You need to be able to define, integrate, test, monitor, and evolve this, because you're never going to get it right the first time. You're going to get really close, and then there's going to be another security control saying, we need versioning on all the things. Oh, okay, great. And let me go back and make a change to that construct. So this is, in a nutshell, what I, and maybe many of you, have incurred in your day-to-day, is you're going through, okay, governance and compliancy, technical complexity, operational impact. I have to scale this, and it has to be secure. That's a lot. And then you go into all the different frameworks for compliance, depending on your industry, the policy versioning of the controls that you have in your environment, the control testing, how do you build that? You have all these different threads inside that pipe that you see here saying, I need to move fast, I need to do resource contention, need to handle that, control validation timing, audit requirements, the list goes on. And you need to be able to scale this approach to meet your customers. So a key takeaway here, we talked about define, integrate, test, monitor, and evolve. And here's where the demos will touch into that definition of that life cycle. CDK aspects patterns for the integration of that. How do you test this into your shift left mentality? And multi-layer validation. Now, here are the things that we will discuss today in our demo, and the things that we won't demonstrate, but might add some homage here. You're going to be able to rinse and repeat from what you learned today to tighten to that, call it diamond quality of controls that you're looking for. You're going to monitor these resources when they come out. It's not you just turn a blind eye to them. And so think of things to constantly look at your environment for the controlled interfaces or the configuration items in your environment. That could be config, describe, resource explorer to look at the details of those resources. And up next, I have Kevin over here who's going to do the demo component.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Kevin DeYoung. I am an SDE on the CloudFormation team. Been with AWS about 8 years. Customer of CloudFormation beforehand. Creator, maintainer for CFN Lint, if anybody uses that for testing your templates, that type of thing. So that's kind of my past a little bit. I know, just a show of hands, how many people use CDK now? Okay. Direct CloudFormation. Anybody? Ooh, couple. All right. Terraform, any other types of providers? Okay, cool. All right, some double hands over there. All right, cool. Just kind of curious where our crowd is at. I'm gonna try to, this is a little bit CDK focused, so we'll talk about some of the tools there, but there are some weave-ins we can do with Terraform, so I'll just try to talk about those as we hit them. So you kind of have an understanding of some options and the tools that I'm gonna show and what may work on the Terraform side of the world as well.
Don't forget the spider down there.
Yeah. All right, perfect. Cool. I'm gonna switch to my code. All right, great. So I'm gonna start with the basic kind of CDK app, right? So CDK, just a general stack we have here. It's gonna be super simple because we're gonna focus on the tools we're gonna integrate into this process, not necessarily the complexity of my stack and the resources I'm trying to deploy. So we're just creating a single stack in this case. And that stack is made up of a basic bucket. And what I want to do during this demo is kind of just build this bucket up. We're just going to keep securing it, but as we do it, we're going to talk about some of the tools to provide feedback. We're going to adjust our bucket configuration, and we're just going to kind of keep iterating on that until we kind of get it to a spot that we feel comfortable with. So one of the first spots we want to talk about is aspects. They were mentioned earlier and kind of what they do. And you have some options in this aspect world. So what we actually have here is kind of a general aspect. This is kind of how they look like. We just created a, my company checker against an I aspect, the interface, then we implement it. And I created a function. I did this because maybe if I wanted to add things that weren't for a bucket, I could just add another function and just string them all together, right? There's ways to do that. But then kind of show you this bucket aspect and what it does. So again, may look a little runoff on the wording there, but you get the idea. So we're going to look for just bucket encryption. Are we using AWS KMS? Just managed key KMS for this example, and just validating our bucket has that configured. If anybody knows, right, that KMS key on that bucket is down a few levels, an array and a thing. So we have to kind of check all those levels, validate they're there. If they're not there, add an annotation, and we kind of keep going down until we validate that the value is AWS KMS, right? So this is kind of a basic check. There might be smarter ways to write this, but basically this is the general way of writing an aspect, and we're kind of doing that. And what we're doing then, of course, is just adding an annotation. So we're just saying add an error, right? This error is a string. We can, customize that string to whatever we want, provide any additional details that we want to have in there or whatever, right? So that's what that aspect kind of looks like. Implementing this in our stack, right? We're just going to go in here and import it. This is where I get to hopefully type correctly, not make any mistakes. So we're just going to import that, and then we're going to do aspects of our app. We're going to add. We're just going to instantiate the My Company checker that we already imported. So pretty simple, right? We just added that in there, added it onto our application or our stack there, or our app in this case. What I'm going to do now is just synthesize this template, and we'll just kind of see what happens with the errors that come out of this. So I added a few attributes on there to kind of, as we do this, there's a bunch of metadata extra resources that CDK creates. It doesn't serve any purpose for the demonstration, so I just remove them just for simplicity's sake. So in this case, right, that aspect now brings back an error, right? So with this aspect, I couldn't synthesize that template. I can't deploy that template, right? It's going to give me that feedback and not allow me to kind of proceed down that path. So now I know what this error is. I can work to try to correct that error. So I'm going to kind of correct this quick, and then we'll take a look at what we get created. So we're going to do bucket encryption. Bucket. And then again, remember that I am trying to remember all the things. And then we're going to do S3, bucket encryption. We're just going to do KMS managed, right? Again, bunch of properties there in CDK that I would have had to specify, right? All that nesting. This was pretty quick and simple for me. Allows me to work a little quicker in that respect. So now we're going to synthesize this template. Take a few seconds, and you'll see that we kind of get back a template now, right? So now I'm passing that aspect. My template synthesizing. I can deploy it. Everything's going to kind of work in this case, right? And now you can see my bucket, right? I have all these encryption things enabled and all that kind of stuff. One thing I'm going to do, though, right now, just to kind of show you the pipeline that we have, I'm just going to actually submit this in and show you the deployment. Start. Simple. So I'm going to push to main. Don't do this normally. I'm just going to do it for the purpose of the demo. And we're going to just kind of show you what the CI/CD process is behind the scenes on this. So I have a couple GitHub Actions enabled on this. We're just going to use GitHub Actions because this is more about the tools, not necessarily the CI/CD tool. So I want to kind of show what happens in this regard. I have two actions right now deployed or set up, right? I have the synthesize and CloudFormation guard action. And this is just going to run guard against my synthesized template so I can validate it's correct. And then I also have a CDK deploy action, which is the one I'm going to focus on right now. We'll get back to the other one in a little bit. And this action, right, is just going to go through and do this deployment into my account. So I just want to show that this is kind of working. Our create's in progress, and it's going through and doing this deployment right now. Right, so my bucket's getting created. We can see the template that gets created, right? So you can see it here, right? We have the encryption enabled. We're getting that bucket deployed. This should finish up successfully if everything's going to be nice to me. All right, create complete. So that's that, right? So we have the kind of these CI/CD processes in the back, a little bit, very vanilla, but are doing this testing and deployment. So we're going to kind of trigger on these a little bit more as we go. So back to this aspects thing, right? So one of the things here, right, is I had to create this custom aspect. I had to put a lot of code in there to validate all these things, right? If I'm looking across all the resources, what do we have? 1,300 CloudFormation resources, right? There's a lot of resources there. There's a lot of things that you may have to know to configure all those aspects, all that type of stuff. I want to have a little bit more of an easy button for that. And so what I'm going to actually talk about is a tool called, if I had the window open, which is unfortunate, we're going to talk about CDK NAG, which is a tool, it's an open source tool that kind of provides a bunch of aspects for you out of the box, right? So this is a great way for me to get started on my compliance things without having to write all these myself. You'll actually notice I'm going to show the available rules and packs that are there, right? There's a bunch of packs that are just come out of the box. I just need to instantiate them and put them in like I had done with my custom one, right? And I'm going to get all this other validation without having to do anything. So I'm going to go through and do that as well. And we're just going to see what comes out of that. So back here, this is going to work pretty similarly. We're just going to implement the AWS solutions checks. Very similar line here. Add new solutions checks. And we're going to run that synth again as well to see what happens on this one. So I know there's going to be a few errors, so we'll just wait for these errors to pop up so we can kind of see them, right? So now I have some more checks that failed, right? I have more best practices that I should be following and things I should be doing here. So, right, again, didn't have to codify anything. I can just implement this out of the box. It's available to everybody to use. Go use it if you, if you want. So what we're going to do is fix this as well and do these. So you can see these errors, the AWS solution S1 and S10. This one is do not have buckets use SSL. So we're going to use the power of CDK again to make this really easy. We're going to do Inforce SSL true. I'm going to just synthesize this so we can kind of see what gets generated, see if we get rid of that error, and then we'll work on that last one. All right, so that's done. All right, so we got rid of the one error. I do want to bring up a capability in the CDK NAG tool and what it can do. So you have an understanding of some of the capabilities here and what it may or may not mean to you. There are ways to suppress this error. So what we're actually going to do is just suppress AWS Solutions S1 just to kind of show you what that ends up looking like in the code. So NAG suppressions. We're going to add a stack suppression. There's actually resource suppressions and there's stack suppressions. So you have a few levels of configuration. I'm taking the easy way out. And I'm going to do a stack suppression. Why are you airing out? Okay. Not the right number of values. Then it's an array. These are all the things I got to remember. Let's see here. So we're going to, the ID is defined as this. So we're going to paste this one in here. And the reason for the demo, we'll just do it like that. And then we're going to synthesize again. So when this template comes out, again, like what I like about the CDK world, right, is this, I got a whole other resource out of this, right? I just did SSL Inforce true, and it knew it had to create a bucket policy, how to associate the bucket policy, how to create a policy that allowed for SSL, right? I didn't have to do much, and I just get that out of the box. So now you'll see now I have two resources here. I'm, providing the SSL, policy that I need for the bucket resource. And then also that NAG suppression also gets listed out in my metadata, so I know that I suppressed that. I can see that in my template. So you can kind of see how that works now in that part. So the next thing, right, is I'm going to kind of go shift a little bit more into the pipeline a little bit, and then we'll come back to the code. I want to show some of the stuff that we can do to verify this on the server and the pipeline side of the world. So there's a few tools I kind of want to talk about next. I'm curious if anybody's heard of these. Anybody heard of CloudFormation hooks? Couple people. Okay. All right. So we'll start there. Let me flipping windows a bunch. Sorry. So hooks. Hooks are a capability on the CloudFormation server side, right, that provide validation of that payload as it comes in. So we can validate against a template, against a resource configuration, and we can take that configuration and we can validate it against a bunch of rules. So this gives me a little bit more validation on the server side, right? So the nag stuff, that's client side. There are probably ways I can just remove it if I wanted to push it through my pipeline, right? Now I'm doing that trust but verify step of verifying on the server side that we're actually doing doing the correct configuration. And so hooks allow us to do different configurations in different ways. What we're going to focus on is the guard hooks. Anybody using CloudFormation Guard? Couple people, less hands than the hook side. All right. So Guard is a DSL that works on CloudFormation YAML or JSON templates. It works on any YAML or JSON template, in fairness, so you can use it for anything. But we're obviously using it for CloudFormation today. So this is also an open source project. It is written in Rust. It's super fast and quick, but it kind of creates a custom DSL for writing those rules. That was me. So like what you can see now, in minus the bucket name, right, and checking for that bucket name, right, we're checking for that same encryption key, but now it's kind of in a more succinct, thing for me, right? It's validating that all those properties at all the levels are set, that the value when I get down there is set to AWS KMS, right? So all that's kind of condensed more into a DSL. Now the good thing with this integration of Guard and hooks is we can make Guard hooks really quickly and easily. It doesn't take much work, and we kind of get all this validation on the server side. But before I do that, the other thing I want to call out is there's a registry of rules. So kind of the same thing we have with CDK neg, we also have with Guard rules. So there is a Guard registry out there that has a bunch of precompiled rules, right, that you can just leverage right out of the box and get going on. I would say it's open source, so trust but verify your work, right? Check it out. But a lot of the things you probably want to check are probably already written as good rules in there. Start from here, and then, iterate from there. So the one thing, right, so like the one thing I want to call out, you saw the CDK neg packs, right? There's like 7 of them in there. There is a bunch in this category. There is a bunch of rule packs already written, right, that you can just leverage out of the box. Why I want to call this out is what we're going to leverage is this CIS AWS benchmark level 1 rule set. It's a little simpler and less complicated for demo sakes. So we're going to start with this and implement it, and then you kind of see how this works from a hook side and like some of the other options we have. So I'm going to show the hook configuration we have. So I already created this hook. It's technically in warn mode, and I'll show kind of maybe what that looks like on that deployment we had, and then we'll run it through as we change it. So I just want to talk a little bit about the configuration options here. So when we configure a hook, we can set it up for a stack, resources, change sets, cloud control API. And there's different reasons why you would do each one. I've chosen resources for this one. Stacks is very good because it gives you the whole stack template. So if you have to write a rule that crosses many resources, this is do a stack template, right? The resource one is just going to give it the payload of the resource. But what's really handy from the server side, is all the intrinsic functions that could exist are resolved. So I know the final values. I can validate those final values. I don't have to worry about those things. The Cloud Control API is also an interesting thing to note. So for those that don't know, right, Cloud Control API is a RESTful API that works off of basically the same code that makes up the CloudFormation resources. So you get your create, read, update, delete, list handlers in more of a API. So actually, we've created this and worked with companies like Pulumi and Terraform, and they actually have providers that work off of the Cloud Control API. So you can actually, if you were using those providers and enabling these hooks, you can get that same validation for CloudFormation, for Terraform, for Pulumi, depending on how they're setting up that code on their side. They have to use that particular provider for it to work. It's not just going to work for the older AWS provider. but I do want to call it out that there is some capabilities there to kind of cross infrastructure as code tools. In the actions, right, we can select to create, update, delete. We don't really care about delete in this scenario. Delete the bucket, go for it. I currently had it set at warn state. There's 2 states available on a hook. There's warn and there's fail. I'll show you what a warn looks like, but the fail will actually fail the deployment. It will cause my deployment to fail, go, and the stack will roll back. You can set up some filters, some different things if you have some, like maybe we have a stack that we're deploying that we want to exempt from these rules, whatever those things. There's some filtering we can do here. I don't have any of that enabled, but you can do some work there if you have some standards of how you'd want to enable that. All right, so I'm going to save this. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go through a deployment. So I'm going to create a branch. Oh, I'm going to create a new branch. Can clear that part out, I guess. And we're going to add these files. My somewhat secure bucket. If I can spell right, nobody judge me for that. And then we're going to push this up. And I want to show you a couple other things that happen here along the way. Oh. My bad. We're going to create a pull request from this. So create a pull request. We'll kick off some actions here. So again, I have 2 actions that are going to go here. This one is the kind of the main one. I'm going to show this one just to show you what the CloudFormation Guard GitHub action that exists out there looks like. So what it's going to do is synthesize this template, and then it's going to validate it against Guard, right? So even though it's, CloudFormation Guard is written around YAML JSON, we can still synthesize that template. We can still validate it. And so now you'll see a bunch of errors that come out. There's a prettier view for this, so I'm not going to spend too much on it, but you get the idea of the payload. It's a failure. Oh, it passed. I don't know. I messed that up. Sorry, I apologize. Should have failed. And there's that part. I'm actually just going to merge this because it'll be easier this way. Do I want to do that? Yeah, I'm going to do that. And go. So I got to check the action configuration. I don't know why that passed. It did fail here. Must be the rules I have written. So I'll show you kind of what it looks like when it fails. Should have been done there on the fail. And then if you're lucky, or not lucky, it does output in Serif format, so you can kind of get all the rules in a little bit easier, consumable way on my PR, right? So this GitHub action's available. It's part of this CloudFormation Guard repo, and it provides that report. And then on the deployment side, I'll show a little bit about how this looks. And did I fail something? I did fail something. Hang on. But I enabled that. Of course, I got rid of the old runs. How would that succeed? Succeed with successful validation. All right. Well, now you're fun times. Let me see here. Oops. I'm going to test it locally here. As many times as I run through this, I get the errors, but then it still passes. All right, what I may show, if I can, is what it should have looked like, even though I'm a little confused about why it didn't trigger. So hang on a sec here. All right. So this is what it should have done. I'm not exactly sure what I messed up, but if maybe through a few minutes here, I'll figure it out. But what usually happens, right, is this. This is what kind of happens in a stack failure. I get back my guard failure rules on that hook, and I can see that those failures are here. I can see the types of rules that I failed. Since it's failing locally, I'm still confused. I don't know. I got to figure out what that was. So sorry about that. The other thing too to note is we have this S3 bucket where the output format gets put in there. So if you have a little bit more verbose output, you can put the full output out there. This kind of gives you a very abbreviated output. So we can start to see some of these additional errors, right? Public bucket being the one, and then bucket versioning being enabled. And so these are, again, our additional checks we want to pass through. I'm going to actually correct those so we can get this working. The other thing to note is I built this locally so we could test this locally as well. That was this command that we have, where we're synthesizing this template, and then we're validating it, doing the CFN guard validate. So we do a synthesize, we can just pump it into guard, it will do the validation. I can get the same feedback locally. So again, you can start to see the things like the restricted public access is here, and those types of things, right? So we're gonna fix this locally and go through that. So hang on here a sec. I'm gonna pull my branch here just to have the most updated code. Somebody might have found my error somewhere out there. Public, we're gonna do public, block public access. And then we're gonna do that one, and we're gonna do block all. So again, right, there's a bunch of properties and failures there. I'm gonna do another synth on that just to show the reduction in the errors. So there was a bunch there, right? Like block public write, block public read, right? With one property in CDK, I can get a bunch of those removed. So now we're just down to bucket versioning. In this case, right, we're saying versioning configuration's not even there, and then additionally the status isn't enabled. That's why there's two little findings there from that side. So the next thing I do want to talk about, we talked about it a little bit in the demonstration as well, is aspects again. So I'm going to circle back a little bit to aspects. So one of the cool things is we can do these add errors, right? We can, alert people that they made a configuration error. But the other thing we can do is just force the compliance to be there, right? We can actually write these aspects that change the properties back to what we need them to be. And so what we're actually going to do in this case is actually just set it on the aspect and correct the error here. So we're going to go node, versioning, configuration, and I'm just going to do this like this. Enabled, oops, status, oops, my bad. Now I'm getting it. Status equals enabled, and we're going to save that. We're going to run this. So you got a few options here, right? When you're using this aspect world, right? We can alert people that they made a configuration error, tell them to correct it, or we can actually just fix it for them, right? And put these in these aspects. So the certain organizations have found these to be very powerful ways to kind of drive and help their developers get those compliance resources really easily. So I'm going to kind of show the result of this, right? That block all got us all those properties set. We got that versioning configuration set as well, right? So now we got all these things set for us and working. So the last thing I want to kind of go through is this idea of, I'm just going to deploy this again, but since it already worked, it should work again. Maybe I'll take a few seconds to figure out why it didn't do it. What's that? Did somebody have notice anything? Oh.
No.
Did I have suppress? I missed that. Oh, I still had suppress on? Well, that would be a problem if I did that. Let's see here. Let this go. I'm going to look at that while we do this, or while that goes. So it should hit the update here soon. Did I even get the event of the hook triggering? I did get the hook triggering. Did I not save it when I left?
I thought you did.
Oh, I set it to fail. Weird. I don't know what I did wrong there. Maybe a timing issue? I don't know. I'll have to look into that. I'm not exactly sure. Saw my previous stacks. I've run this a bunch, and every time it fails, except for that time. So go figure. So there we went through. We updated it again. My hooks passed, of course, and went through. So that way, right, like all those hooks should check out and comply, right, and then allow you that resource to be developed. The other thing, too, I want to talk about a little bit with hooks is while there's an easy one for the guard, you don't have to use guard. You can use Lambda. You can write your own Lambda function. So sometimes organizations find it useful maybe to pull other sources of information. Maybe you want to check tags for certain compliance checks and certain rules and the values of those. You can write Lambda checks and do that same kind of validation with the hook side of the world. We're just using guard for this demo to kind of show the easiness of doing that, if it worked. So the last thing I want to talk about, right, is, okay, so I kind of got this working. I had to set all these values. I had to go through a bunch of iteration, right? I had to fail, fix it, right, as I was proceeding through this process. The next thing that we want to talk about a little bit was related to the construct methodology, right? This idea of this L2.5 construct is commonly called. It's the idea that we can kind of provide a bucket configuration that already complies with my standards. So what I have here is another bucket configuration, right? So this is a construct that I created, and it kind of extends the L2 construct that already exists, but it allows me just to apply these properties, for my users and the users of this construct. So you can see I already have a versioning enabled. I have Inforce SSL, KMS, right? All those settings already set right here. What's nice from this, right, is I can vend this out to my developers. They can consume this, right, and use it without having to necessarily worry about all these values and all these settings that I may have to have them set for their compliance and security reasons. So when we go back here, right, so one of the things I'm going to do actually is just send this out so we can kind of compare the results. Always takes a few seconds, all right? So you can see, we got all these, the bucket stuff, all that stuff, right? Our bucket, 4879, 43879. And what we're going to do is just replace this. So company bucket. And what we're going to do is just do a new one of those. And now I can remove all these values. I don't need to know these, right? I just know I'm going to get my company's configuration for a bucket that meets our compliance standards. So I reduce this down to this, right? And now when I do my synth,
think of guard doing the attack sequence finding where it's bringing those findings together. With detected, you can do that across any resource.
you'll see that I still kind of get it synthesized out. You'll see all those same kind of settings are still configured and still enabled here, right? It's just much less lines of code that I have to worry about as a user, inside my organization about how to, deploy a compliant bucket. So yeah, I think that kind of sums up the demo portion. I think I got everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Groovy. Double checking. So yeah, any questions on the demo side of the world or anything there? No, not yet.
Raise
okay.
hands. We'll have some more time too at the end. Kevin, thank you so much for the demo, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
perfect. Hit the button.
it. Yeah, I gotcha. All right. Okay, just to kind of wrap things up, and then we'll have some Q&A. I'll come out to the audience given the AV setup that we have, and I'll repeat the question you guys have out there in the audience so that everybody can hear and Kevin can tackle it or I can tackle it. So AWS CloudFormation, right? As you're building these things, think of a castle, right? That's a direct correlation of the building blocks of your cloud environment. We talked about CDK. These are smart building blocks. They know how to wire things up. Kevin talked about, I have a bucket. I need to build it. Here's my construct. Boom. It has the SSL, the encryption, and the policies that align to your corporate needs. We talked about CDK nag. Think of this as that picky friend that's always saying, well, you could have done it better, right? It's always in the wings helping you build your environment cleaner so that you're not having failures in the pipeline. You can catch these ahead of time. You have AWS CDK aspects. These are the magic paint. You built your castle, but you forgot to put in a window. Or I forgot to add my SSL across all the things, or bucket versioning. That's the really powerful component of aspects, is it allows you to not go into all your different code repositories, and I've been there, it's very painful, and make that modification. You can cross-cut around all your repos and add those magic windows. Kevin talked about CloudFormation Guard. This is the rule book, right? It's there to align to your code, help you synthesize locally if you want, and say, hey, are you passing or not? And then linting, as I kind of joked about it earlier, it's definitely helpful, but it's your cleanup helper. It's looking behind the scenes as you're writing the code, capturing things that, auto-completion helps, but the linting is definitely a welcome friend in this regard. Some key takeaways. This is the repo that Kevin has and was working from. So feel free to grab those QR codes. I know I tried to simplify it. I know there's two on the screen. I'll pause here so folks can grab it, and I'll go into the next one where we have the other QR codes to other components of the talk. Everybody good? Okay, cool. I'm going to go to the next slide. So that's the AWS Guard Rules Registry that Kevin was talking about. And a quick little nod, if you're a Security Hub customer, this is very relational to the Guard Rules Registry. So give it a look. You'll see, if you know about conformance packs, the rules registry should read very similar to that. CDK nag as well. So I'm going to let people take photos. Gentleman over there. All right. Thank you so much for participating, and I appreciate you all coming out to Philadelphia for Reinforce. Don't forget that GRC441 talk. I think it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow, there was 2 sessions. There was one earlier, one tomorrow. Yep.
Cool. Thanks, folks. Have a great Reinforce.